The main audience is basically what in the United States would be high school, so roughly ages 14 to 18. A little younger is okay, middle school. But we have, as of last year, a middle school specific title called Puentes, which Melissa will be sharing on in the next session, and I'll give you the info for that. So if you have middle school students, there are certainly people who use Nuestra Historia 1, which was sort of written for ninth grade, roughly 14-year-olds in mind, but can go up or down a bit from that. But if you have the opportunity to check out the presentation on Puentes, which is structured the same way, just the content is selected more with middle school students in mind. So as I said, if those ages roughly correspond to grades 9 through 12 in United States high schools, we also have, and Aaron will be presenting on this later in the morning, we also have an AP title. So there are people who maybe do Nuestra Historia 1 already in 8th grade, or maybe skip around a bit, and they then would get to Nuestra Historia 4 in 11th grade and be able to do the AP in 12th grade, or however it works out, shifted up or down in your school. The levels in terms of actual are from the very beginning, so starting at absolute 0, which would be novice low, and then getting in the Nuestra Historia 4, and especially in the AP titles into the advanced level. That's actually well beyond where actual says a person can get in 4 years. So we've made sure to go from absolute 0 to beyond where students are likely to get, so that there'll never be a situation where you would run out of material. We have breakdowns, more specific breakdowns about leveling and the can-do statements that correspond to different levels that are in different Nuestra Historia units in the materials online that I'll show you on the website. Last but not least, it's worth noting that the target audience for these texts is second language learners. In other words, people who don't speak Spanish at home. We call those heritage language learners, either if they speak Spanish at home or have in some other way are participants in the Spanish speaking community. Although we did just recently, this past fall, add a lot of support for heritage language learners that happen to be placed in second language learner courses. But ideally, as you probably know, if there are heritage language learners at your school, they tend to be best served by instruction and materials created specifically for them. Nuestra Historia and all the Voces materials are designed for second language learners, but again, we do have some support. So let's take a look at what this all even looks like. Just real quick though, if you are one of those folks who teaches middle school and wants to check out Puentes, make sure you do that at 9:40. That's in 12 minutes. So right after this session, just pop over to, I think it's Zoom room 1, breakout room 1, but don't quote me on that. And then a little bit later at 10:20, if you're interested in AP, Aaron will be covering the AP content that we have as well. So I'll be staying kind of in the middle, 1 through 4, as opposed to the middle school, which is below it. If you have even younger students, then that would be Primaria, and Erica is presenting on that in the session even following that. I want to say it's around 10:40 or 11, but you can see that on the schedule. So let's finally get to what you're probably most interested in seeing, which is the content itself, how the curriculum is organized and how a unit is organized. I will show you how a unit is organized, but first I just want to give you the overall structure of the title itself. So this right here, what you see is not a unit, but is the entire directory. We call it the directory. You can think of it as the menu. This is screenshotted from the website. It's course an introduction. Each level, Nuestra Historia 1, 2, 3, and 4, each level has 6 units, and all 6 units correspond to the AP themes. So even if you're not teaching AP, you still there's not explicit reference all the time to the AP test or anything like that, but the themes are drawn from there. And if you are someone who builds towards AP, then you can be confident that even in level 1, students are spiraling up based on the 6 AP themes and sub-themes. So you can see here, Unidad 1 through 6, they are built right into the curriculum, full novelas. So these are actual books that people could buy online as a printed book, but we also have them in embedded in the curriculum, a certain number of them, along with comprehension exercises and some other things. And so you can have those just as an extra resource for students, or some people actually use them as a unit. And we have information about that. and there's other appendix type materials, cultural exploration videos, and more. So this is the overall layout of the year, or the entire book, if you want to think of it that way. Let's take a look at a unit, because again, that's going to be kind of the locus of most of your teaching, right? Here's just another example. So this first example I gave was the organization of Nuestra Historia 1. I just want to give you kind of an introductory example. Really quick, here's the organization of Nuestra Historia 3. So you can see how it has basically the same structure of the 6 units plus some appendix type material. So here we have a unit. This is unit 3 of Nuestra Historia. It's actually Nuestra Historia 1. The screenshot still has Nuestra Historia 3, the cover here, but this is from 1. So if in that directory that I had before, we clicked on Nuestra Historia unit 1, Unidad 3, this is what would appear below that. And so you see this always, does my mouse cursor, is it floating around on there? I can use it to point at stuff. Excellent.
Yes, it's
always
working.
Can-do, what we call the can-do pre-assessment. This is basically the can-do statements that are associated with this unit. It's kind of a questionnaire that students fill out, and it generates it saves that, so that at the end, if you want, not everyone uses this, but if you want, down here where it says resumen de trabajo, a sort of review of the work, this has students then again reflect on those same can-do statements, and they can kind of select their they can self-assess on their progress, and it will kind of generate a before and after for students. So that's the idea behind this can-do pre-assessment at the beginning and the resumen de trabajo at the end. There's always an essential question or more, 2 or 3 for the unit, where it says essential question connection. Then there's in Nuestra Historia 1 and 2, each unit has a focus on 2 specific countries where Spanish is a commonly spoken language, including the United States. Sometimes it features there because the United States is a place where Spanish is commonly spoken. I live in the United States now, by the way, though I grew up in Austria and in Canada. I live in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. And when you click on this section that says the 2 countries, there's a variety of cultural background, lots of images, more discussion questions and things like that, to set up then, well, partly for its own sake, and then to set up all the stories, which are in some way or another set in those countries. By the way, even though it says aburrida in Minnesota, and you might be thinking to yourself, I don't believe Minnesota is in either Chile or El Salvador, you're absolutely correct. There may be a location by that name in those countries, but this refers actually to someone who is in Minnesota and has a friend from Chile. So there's always a relation in that way. I would say the backbone of the Nuestra Historia curriculum and all the languages, but here we're focused on Nuestra Historia, is the short stories, the historietas. That's the place where most of the sort of culture in context is met. It's the place where most of the new language is introduced, so vocabulary and constructions, grammar, etc. And most of the activities that students do are related to a specific one of these historietas. If you look here, there are several historietas, and in any given unit, there are also a few what we call historia larga, so long stories. Anywhere where it says historieta, and then a number and a title, that's a place where new language is introduced and then reinforced in a story that's interesting and also has embedded cultural content. Whenever there's an historia larga, there's no new language introduced there. It recycles all the language from preceding historietas. So where you see historia larga, una para Pablo, that uses language from the preceding 2 historietas, and the historias largas down below recycle vocabulary from all the preceding stories, but still in a story context. So again, that's why I say the stories really are the backbone. I want to point out something about the logic of any given short story section. So for example, if you expand this historieta 1, aburrida in Minnesota, or expand any of these others, and by pointing out a little something general about language teaching and language learning. Now, obviously, all this would be embedded in resources and cultural experience. But on a linguistic level, you can view language learning both on a large scale, like over the course of a student's learning career, and on a small scale with any piece of content, as where you got to learn some pertinent words and phrases. You got to build that up into actual sentences and interactions, and then move towards connected texts and eventually longer text and discourse. And the reason I show this is because this is embodied in every single short story section. As I said, this appears in the context of both input and output, activity interactions, and of course, I don't want to just put only linguistic information without emphasizing the role of culture there. But let's take a look at how all this is set up. So if you click on a specific story, this one is back from Nuestra Historia 1. This is actually the very first story in Nuestra Historia 1. But if you click there, we actually follow this same progression. So the vocabulario importante section is where students are introduced in a variety of ways to individual words and phrases. Preguntas personales, this is where we give you a lot of tools. And Erica and I will be in a session a bit later on when we talk about how to teach a story. We'll talk a lot about using these preguntas personales to have students begin making, interacting with you and with each other on a sentence level. And then we have these various sections, una historia única, and especially the story proper. So you see right here, it says necesita un lápiz. That is the story for this historieta section. You start getting into paragraphs and short texts in a later, this is level 1, in a later unit or a later level, that would count even as longer text and discourse. So let me show you the same thing for something from Nuestra Historia 3. Again, this is if you click on a certain unit, this happens to be, I think, unit 2 in Nuestra Historia 3, and then on a specific story, which again is the backbone, the core where everything's introduced, you'll see again this progression from individual words and phrases in vocabulario importante, and so on. And you can see here I've drawn arrows from the main story, Lo que sobra, and from an alternative version all the way to the longer text and discourse, because by now in Nuestra Historia 3, these stories are actually quite long. And you can see here as well all kinds of activities that are that relate and recapitulate the information from those stories, so that so the students really can internalize that and all the skills that go with it. So lots more info on how to actually use these stories in the upcoming presentations. I just want to show you really quickly, and in order to do this, I'm going to change what I'm sharing to my actual screen. And this is, we just have, as you know, just a couple more minutes left before we switch to the next round of presentations. But here we go. Are we seeing now what looks more like a browser page with Nuestra Historia? So this is where the screenshots were taken from. And if I click on this directory up here, oops, if I click on this directory here, then that's what takes me to the info that I saw, that you just saw, and to all these sections. So I want to point out some of what this actually looks like. If we go, for example, to Historieta, Necesito un lápiz, and the story itself, in the earliest levels, there will be separate slides with all the pictures, and because it's a very short text, it's below it. In the higher levels, it looks more like sort of it's laid out more like a newspaper article with the text and embedded images and things like that. So you have tons of ways to expose students to the story and the content. There's also always, every single story, every single level, there's always a native speaker audio that you can use in various ways as well. For time reasons, and you will receive all these resources and further resources, including how to look at some of the pacing. I'm actually going to skip, because people are, especially people who are considering adoption or have recently adopted, are often very concerned about that. I'm going to skip back in my presentation to, or rather, because I'm already in this window, I'll show you on the website instead. If you're, do you see now the basic Voces website? Is that what's appearing?
Yes,
yeah.
We can see it.
So if you want all the information on pacing, scope and sequence and things like that for any title, you go to here, vocesdigital.com. You don't have to type this index.php, that'll happen automatically. You'll come here to Voces Library and then click on Digital Curriculum. And when you click that, you'll see all these different options. the different titles. And if you want that information for any given text, so let's pick at random Nuestra Historia 2, because I've already shown some 1 and 3, and you go to supporting documents, this section right here, you have not just a scope and sequence, but a detailed pacing guide for the first unit, like literally by the minute for about 5 weeks worth of instruction. Do this for 8 minutes. If you want a lot of guidance, do this for 8 minutes. Then for the next 10 minutes, do this. But we also have, this might be what you'll end up being most interested in, this thing that we call a profile-based pacing guide. And what profile here refers to is the fact that what I mentioned before, you might be a person who uses Voces as your entire curriculum, or someone who just uses it on the side. And it breaks people up into 4 profiles, from most highest use of Voces to just using as a resource, and you can get all that info there. So because we've flown through this, and you may well have questions, we actually have a specific Q&A session later on, and I want to share that with you really quickly, the info for you there. Let me go back to sharing the pertinent screen, and then we'll already proceed to the next session. In fact, there may be people arriving in here as we speak who are on their way to that next session. But here we go. So if you have any questions, which I expect you may, we're going to have a dedicated longer Q&A session at 1 p.m. There's Lorena, would you put, Lorena or Chris, if you haven't yet, a link to the daily survey?
Just posted it. Both of us did.
Well, excellent. That's also where you can add questions that we'll then look at in the Q&A session and be sure to answer. You can always email me personally for some more support on this. It's just justinsb@vocesdigital.com. And in general, any of our first names plus last initial, except for JJ, which is just jj@vocesdigital.com. You can reach us like that, so that we can explore in greater detail these things. But I hope this is kind of giving you an overview, like what's even the deal with Nuestra Historia, what's it all about, that focus on stories, and some of the basic resources, and you'll get lots more, a deeper dive into a lot of the resources, how to use the stories and so on over the course of the morning.